For generations, the Yurok tribe has fought to protect its sovereignty, its lands, and its way of life. But as legal battles with federal and state authorities intensify, the question remains: can the tribe maintain its independence in the face of relentless external pressures? The Yurok tribe, one of the largest Native American tribes in California, has a long and complex history of struggle, resilience, and survival. Despite centuries of external pressures from the U.S. government and state authorities, the Yurok people have continuously fought to maintain their legal autonomy, cultural traditions, and sacred connection to their ancestral lands. This is not just a history of oppression, but a testament to an unbreakable spirit. Their journey embodies the larger struggle of Native American tribes across the nation, a fight for sovereignty, self-determination, and dignity. For thousands of years, the Yurok people thrived along the Klamath River in what is now Northern California. Their society was structured around fishing, hunting, and an intricate system of cultural and spiritual practices. The river was not just a source of sustenance, but the very soul of the Yurok people. Their world was defined by ceremonial traditions, sustainable land stewardship, and a deep reverence for nature. This way of life was violently disrupted in the 19th century when European settlers arrived during the California Gold Rush. The influx of settlers led to the exploitation of natural resources, widespread environmental destruction, and most devastatingly, the systematic displacement and brutalization of native peoples. The Yurok, like many other tribes, were subjected to forced removals, massacres, and cultural suppression. The U.S. government's policies of forced assimilation aimed to erase their identity, pushing them into reservations and stripping them of their rights. Throughout the 20th century, the Yurok tribe engaged in relentless legal battles to reclaim their autonomy. Federal and state governments imposed restrictions on land use, resource management, and fishing rights, effectively criminalizing the very practices that had sustained the Yurok people for generations. The 1970s and 1980s marked a turning point when Native American activism gained momentum across the country. One of the most significant struggles for the Yurok was the fight over fishing rights. The Klamath River had long been their primary source of salmon, which held both nutritional and spiritual importance. However, restrictive state laws and commercial overfishing devastated salmon populations and directly threatened the tribe's way of life. In response, Yurok activists and fishers defied state-imposed fishing bans, risking arrest and violence to protect their ancestral rights. The legal fight reached a crucial milestone with the Bolt decision of 1974, which reaffirmed the treaty rights of Native American tribes to fish in their traditional waters. While the ruling primarily impacted tribes in Washington state, it set a national precedent that empowered tribes like the Yurok to assert their fishing rights more forcefully. Beyond legal battles, the Yurok tribe has been at the forefront of environmental conservation. The devastation of the Klamath River ecosystem due to hydroelectric dams, deforestation, and pollution has had dire consequences for the tribe's fishing practices. In recent decades, the Yurok people have worked tirelessly to remove destructive dams, restore salmon populations, and advocate for sustainable land management. A historic victory came when the tribe played a key role in the movement to remove 4 major dams on the Klamath River, marking one of the most significant dam removal projects in U.S. history. This was not just an environmental achievement, it was a cultural and spiritual restoration for the Yurok people, who have always seen the health of the river as inseparable from their own survival. Despite these victories, the Yurok tribe still faces significant challenges. Federal and state governments continue to impose bureaucratic barriers, while economic hardships make it difficult for many tribal members to sustain traditional ways of life. Issues such as land reclamation, water rights, and cultural preservation remain at the forefront of the tribe's ongoing struggle. In recent years, the Yurok people have also had to combat external threats such as illegal cannabis farming on their lands, which has led to water theft, pollution, and increased violence. These modern threats, though different from the past, echo the same historical patterns of exploitation and disregard for native sovereignty. The Yurok tribe's story is one of endurance and unwavering determination. Their fight for sovereignty is not just about legal recognition. It is about preserving a way of life, protecting the land, and ensuring that future generations can continue their sacred traditions. Through legal battles, environmental activism, and cultural revitalization, the Yurok people continue to carve out a path of resilience in the face of adversity. As the tribe moves forward, their story serves as an inspiration, not just to other Native American communities, but to all who believe in justice, self-determination, and the right to live in harmony with the land. The Yurok have shown that sovereignty is not merely a legal status, but a deeply spiritual and cultural identity that no amount of oppression can erase. For centuries, the Yurok people have lived along the Klamath River in what is now Northern California. Their laws, traditions, and governance systems have been deeply rooted in their culture, emphasizing balance, respect for the land, and community welfare. However, the imposition of U.S. law upon Yurok lands has led to long-standing legal and jurisdictional conflicts, particularly regarding land rights, natural resource management, and criminal justice. These disputes have profound implications for the sovereignty and self-determination of the Yurok people. The Yurok people have always viewed land as a communal resource, something that belongs to the tribe collectively rather than as individual parcels owned by private citizens. In contrast, U.S. law operates on principles of private ownership, property rights, and legal titles. When the federal government imposed land allotments through the Dawes Act of 1887, vast tracts of Yurok land were fragmented and eventually transferred out of indigenous hands. Today, much of what was once Yurok land is held by non-native landowners, limiting the tribe's ability to exercise sovereignty over their ancestral territory. This conflict is further exacerbated by modern legal frameworks that fail to recognize traditional Yurok land use. Efforts by the tribe to reclaim land are often met with bureaucratic red tape, complex legal battles, and resistance from both state and federal governments. Even when land is returned, U.S. law continues to dictate how it may be used, often restricting Yurok governance over their own territory. The Klamath River is not just a waterway to the Yurok, it is a lifeline, deeply intertwined with their spiritual beliefs, cultural traditions, and economic survival. Salmon fishing has sustained the Yurok people for generations, but U.S. laws regulating fisheries, hydroelectric dams, and water allocation have systematically eroded their ability to maintain this practice. For decades, the federal government allowed the construction of dams along the Klamath River, disrupting the salmon's natural migration patterns and causing a drastic decline in fish populations. While the Yurok tribe has fought to have these dams removed, legal and political obstacles have made the process slow and difficult. Additionally, water rights disputes between farmers, the state, and the tribe have led to conflicts over how much water should be allocated to the river to sustain fish populations. The Yurok's traditional ecological knowledge, which promotes sustainable fishing practices and environmental balance, is often dismissed in favor of Western scientific management strategies. Yet, time and time again, the Yurok have demonstrated a deep understanding of environmental conservation, proving that their traditional methods are not only effective but necessary for long-term ecological health. One of the most contentious areas of conflict between Yurok law and U.S. law is criminal jurisdiction. Traditionally, Yurok law emphasized restoration and community-based justice rather than punitive measures. Crimes were often resolved through mediation, restitution, and public accountability, ensuring that offenders took responsibility for their actions in a way that benefited the victim and the community. However, under U.S. federal law, tribal courts have limited jurisdiction over crimes committed on their land. The Major Crimes Act of 1885 granted the federal government authority over major felonies committed on reservations, effectively stripping tribes of their ability to prosecute serious crimes. This has led to significant issues, including underpolicing and lack of legal recourse for Indigenous victims of crime. A particularly distressing aspect of this legal framework is its impact on cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women, MMIW. Because of jurisdictional loopholes, many crimes against Native women go uninvestigated or unpunished, as federal agencies fail to prioritize these cases. The Yurok tribe, along with many other Native nations, has called for legal reforms to restore their authority over criminal matters on their lands, arguing that tribal courts are better equipped to handle justice in a culturally appropriate manner. Despite these legal and jurisdictional conflicts, the Yurok people continue to fight for their rights, asserting their sovereignty through various legal battles and advocacy efforts. In recent years, the tribe has made progress in reclaiming land, restoring water rights, and strengthening their judicial system. The removal of dams on the Klamath River, scheduled to be completed in the coming years, is a significant victory for the Yurok and a testament to their resilience. However, challenges remain. The legal system in the United States still prioritizes federal and state authority over tribal sovereignty, making it difficult for tribes like the Yurok to exercise full control over their lands and resources. Many of the legal doctrines that govern native land and resource rights, such as the doctrine of discovery and plenary power, are remnants of colonial-era policies that continue to undermine indigenous self-determination. The conflicts between Yurok law and U.S. law are more than just legal disputes. They are struggles for recognition, respect, and justice. While progress has been made, there is still much work to be done to ensure that the Yurok people can govern themselves according to their own traditions and values. Moving forward, solutions must include legal reforms that empower tribal governments, increased recognition of indigenous knowledge in environmental management, and stronger protections for native victims of crime. The Yurok people have long maintained a vision of sovereignty and sustainability, and it is up to policymakers, legal institutions, and the broader public to support that vision rather than obstruct it. Ultimately, the reconciliation of these legal conflicts requires a fundamental shift in how the United States views tribal sovereignty, not as an obstacle, but as a vital part of justice, environmental stewardship, and human rights. Until then, the Yurok will continue their fight, as they have for centuries, to protect their land, their people, and their way of life. The Yurok tribe, located along the rugged northern coast of California, is deeply connected to the land and the river systems that sustain their community. For thousands of years, they have stewarded their ancestral territories, from the towering redwoods to the winding Klamath River. The tribe's way of life is intricately tied to these natural resources, and their cultural heritage is embedded in the very land they occupy. However, as the world around them rapidly changes, the Yurok tribe finds itself locked in an ongoing struggle to protect their land, their waters, and their traditions from encroaching forces of modernization, industrialization, and state and federal policies that prioritize economic development over environmental preservation. At the heart of this struggle lies a fundamental clash of values. For the Yurok tribe, their environmental laws and practices are not merely a matter of governance, but a sacred responsibility. Their laws are based on a deep reverence for the earth, a reverence passed down through generations. The Yurok people have a holistic view of the world, where the well-being of the land, water, animals, and humans are interconnected. They understand that a thriving ecosystem is essential for their survival. Their environmental protection laws are built upon these ancient principles, laws that govern how the tribe interacts with the land, the fish, and the wildlife, laws that are intended to maintain balance and sustainability. Yet, despite these centuries-old traditions, the Yurok tribe has found itself in constant opposition to federal and state policies that prioritize short-term economic gain over long-term environmental sustainability. The Klamath River, which flows through the heart of Yurok ancestral lands, is a key point of contention. The river, once teeming with salmon, has seen its waters increasingly polluted, its fish populations dwindling. The federal government, with its focus on agricultural interests, has allowed practices that harm the river and the creatures that depend on it. Dam construction, overfishing, water diversion, and pollution have all taken their toll on the once pristine waterway. For the Yurok people, the loss of the salmon is not just an ecological disaster, it is a spiritual and cultural one. Salmon are considered sacred by the tribe, a symbol of life and renewal. They have been central to Yurok traditions for millennia, both as a food source and as a key element in ceremonial practices. The decline of the salmon population represents a deeper existential crisis for the Yurok tribe. As the river grows sicker, so too does their community's sense of identity. To address this crisis, the Yurok tribe has taken bold steps to assert its sovereignty and protect its ancestral lands. They have pushed for stricter environmental protections and have fought for the restoration of the Klamath River ecosystem. They have called for the removal of dams that block salmon migration, a critical step in the recovery of the fish population. Their efforts have not come without resistance. State and federal agencies, often aligned with commercial interests, have opposed these measures. The federal government, in particular, has been slow to act on the tribe's calls for action, preferring to prioritize the demands of agriculture and energy industries, which often exacerbate environmental degradation. The Yurok tribe's battle is not just one of survival, but one of cultural preservation. For the Yurok people, the land is not just a resource to be exploited, it is a living entity with which they share a reciprocal relationship. Their environmental laws reflect this understanding. These laws are not abstract regulations, they are rooted in a deep, spiritual connection to the natural world. Yet, for many outside the tribe, These laws are often seen as outdated or at odds with the prevailing economic interests of the state and federal governments. In recent years, however, the tribe has seen some success in its efforts to push for change. The Yurok tribe has been instrumental in the movement to remove the dams from the Klamath River, which would open up critical salmon migration routes and restore balance to the ecosystem. This initiative, supported by environmental groups and tribal activists, is one of the most significant victories in the tribe's long-standing fight for environmental justice. In 2020, after years of lobbying and advocacy, the Klamath River Renewal Corporation was established, signaling a shift in how environmental issues in the region are addressed. But even as the tribe celebrates this progress, challenges remain. The fight for the Klamath River is far from over. Despite the agreements in place for dam removal, there are still numerous legal and political hurdles to overcome. The federal government's commitment to the project remains uncertain, and opposition from commercial interests, such as agricultural lobbies, persists. These industries, which rely on the river's water for irrigation, have fought tooth and nail against the tribe's efforts to restore the river. The Yurok tribe's environmental protection efforts extend beyond just the Klamath River. They are engaged in a broader struggle to protect their lands from the encroachment of industrial activities, such as logging and mining, that threaten the health of their environment. The tribe has worked to establish conservation easements and other legal measures to prevent the degradation of their lands. They have also sought to educate the public about the importance of environmental stewardship and the need to respect indigenous knowledge and practices. Despite the daunting challenges they face, the Yurok tribe remains resolute. Their commitment to environmental protection is a testament to their resilience and their unwavering belief in the interconnectedness of all life. The tribe's environmental laws are not simply a set of rules. They are a manifestation of a worldview that sees humanity as part of the natural world, not separate from it. This perspective stands in stark contrast to the dominant paradigm of exploitation and consumption, which often sees nature as a resource to be extracted and used. For the Yurok tribe, the fight to protect their lands and waters is a fight for their future. It is a fight to preserve their culture, their way of life, and their identity as a people. Their struggle is not just about environmental protection. It is about sovereignty, self-determination, and the right to live in harmony with the earth. The Yurok tribe's efforts serve as a powerful reminder that environmental justice is inextricably linked to social justice, and that the fight for the planet is, ultimately, a fight for the rights of indigenous peoples who have long been its stewards. The ongoing clash between the Yurok tribe and federal and state policies reflects a larger battle over the future of our planet. It is a battle between those who seek to preserve the earth for future generations and those who view the planet as a resource to be exploited for short-term profit. The Yurok tribe's steadfast commitment to environmental protection offers a model for the world, a model rooted in respect for nature, reverence for life, and a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all living things. Their fight is not just for the survival of their people, but for the survival of the planet itself. For the Yurok people, justice is not about retribution, but about restoring harmony. Traditional justice systems within the tribe focus on mediation, restitution, and ensuring that offenders make amends to both the victim and the community. Rather than incarceration, Yurok practices encourage healing circles, where all affected parties, including victims, offenders, and elders, engage in discussions to find a resolution. These practices, rooted in a deep understanding of human relationships, help rebuild trust and mend broken bonds. The goal is to reintegrate offenders into society as responsible individuals rather than branding them as criminals. Many cases involve direct compensation, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and community service. Elders play a critical role, guiding offenders to understand their actions and make meaningful reparations. This system is particularly effective in addressing disputes, minor offenses, and social conflicts within the community, reinforcing cultural identity and collective responsibility. Despite its effectiveness, the Yurok legal system faces significant jurisdictional challenges, especially when dealing with non-native offenders. Historically, tribal governments had the authority to prosecute all crimes occurring on their lands, regardless of the perpetrator's background. However, U.S. policies and court decisions over time have eroded this power. The 1978 Supreme Court decision in Oliphant v. Suquamish Indian Tribe ruled that tribal nations lack criminal jurisdiction over non-native individuals. This ruling severely limited the ability of tribes like the Yurok to enforce justice against non-natives who commit crimes on their lands. In practice, this means that if a non-native individual assaults, steals from, or even kills a Yurok person within tribal territory, the tribal justice system cannot prosecute them. Instead, the case falls under federal or state jurisdiction, where prosecution rates for crimes against native people remain alarmingly low. This legal gap leaves many crimes against indigenous people unpunished. Victims often find themselves in a legal limbo, waiting for federal authorities to act, often with little success. The lack of local enforcement power fosters a sense of helplessness, as tribal communities witness crimes go unaddressed due to bureaucratic red tape and jurisdictional complexity. One of the most critical consequences of this legal barrier is the high rate of violence against Native women. According to statistics, Indigenous women face some of the highest rates of sexual and domestic violence in the United States, much of it perpetrated by non-Native individuals. Without the power to prosecute these crimes, tribal communities are left vulnerable. The 2013 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, marked a small victory, granting some tribal nations the power to prosecute non-native individuals for certain domestic violence-related offenses. However, the law remains limited in scope, excluding crimes such as sexual assault committed by strangers, human trafficking, and child abuse. The Yurok tribe, like many others, continues to push for broader jurisdiction to protect its people and uphold justice on its lands. In response to these challenges, the Yurok tribe has taken proactive steps to strengthen its legal system while working within federal constraints. The tribe has developed a robust judicial framework, including tribal courts, law enforcement agencies, and advocacy programs. The Yurok Tribal Court, for example, integrates traditional restorative justice principles while handling cases within its limited jurisdiction. Furthermore, the tribe actively engages in intergovernmental agreements with California and federal agencies to enhance cooperation in criminal matters. By asserting its legal sovereignty, the Yurok tribe is not only protecting its people, but also setting a precedent for other indigenous nations seeking similar autonomy. One of the most innovative efforts is the Yurok Wellness Court, which focuses on healing rather than punishment for substance-related offenses. Recognizing the link between addiction, trauma, and crime, this court works to rehabilitate individuals through culturally relevant treatment programs, mentorship, and community involvement. By addressing the root causes of criminal behavior, the Yurok Wellness Court has successfully reduced recidivism and strengthened community bonds. While progress has been made, there is still much work to be done. True justice for the Yurok people and indigenous communities across the nation requires legal reforms that fully recognize tribal sovereignty. Expanding the jurisdiction of tribal courts to prosecute all crimes occurring within their lands, regardless of the perpetrator's identity, is a crucial step. There is also a growing movement to integrate indigenous legal philosophies into broader criminal justice systems. The success of restorative justice models like those practiced by the Yurok tribe has sparked interest among policymakers, social justice advocates, and legal scholars. If embraced on a wider scale, these practices could provide a humane and effective alternative to the punitive systems that dominate mainstream law enforcement. For now, the Yurok people continue their fight, not just for legal authority, but for the right to uphold their traditions and protect their community. Through resilience, advocacy, and an unwavering commitment to justice, they are challenging a system that has historically undermined indigenous rights and sovereignty. Their efforts serve as a powerful reminder that justice is not merely about punishment, but about healing, accountability, and the restoration of balance in society. The concept of sovereignty is rooted in the idea of self-governance, the power and authority to make decisions that affect one's own people and land. For Native American tribes, sovereignty is not just a legal term, but a vital cornerstone of their identity, history, and survival. However, this right to self-governance, one of the most fundamental principles in Native American law, remains under constant threat. The future of tribal sovereignty is marked by ongoing legal battles, negotiations, and complex relationships between Native American tribes and the United States government. These struggles are more than just legal conflicts. They represent a profound clash of histories, cultures, and worldviews that affect the lives of millions of Native people. The early history of Native American tribes was one of self-governance and autonomy. Tribes governed themselves, developed their own laws, cultures, and political systems, long before the arrival of European settlers. The United States government, however, sought to control and assimilate native populations through a series of treaties, policies, and at times forceful actions. The forced removal of native people from their ancestral lands, the broken promises of treaties, and the imposition of colonial systems have left a scar on Native American communities. Despite these setbacks, many tribes have fought to maintain their sovereignty and reclaim their rights. The legal framework surrounding tribal sovereignty is a complex web of treaties, federal laws, Supreme Court decisions, and executive orders. These legal battles are fought in courthouses and legislative chambers, but they are not just about legal principles. They are about the very survival of Native American cultures and communities. For many tribes, sovereignty is the only way to ensure that their traditions, languages, and ways of life can be passed down to future generations. The U.S. government has never fully respected the sovereignty of Native American tribes. Early on, the United States signed treaties with tribes, acknowledging their status as independent nations with their own territories. However, these treaties were often broken, ignored, or reinterpreted by the federal government. As the U.S. expanded westward, Native tribes were forcibly removed from their lands, and their self-governance systems were dismantled. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the federal government implemented policies of assimilation and cultural genocide, including the boarding school system, which aimed to strip Native people of their languages and traditions. In the face of these challenges, Native American tribes fought for their rights in a variety of ways, including through legal action. One of the key turning points came in the early 20th century with the rise of Native American legal scholars and advocates. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 marked a shift in federal policy, as the U.S. government began to recognize the importance of tribal self-governance. The Indian Civil Rights Act of 1968 further solidified this recognition, providing a legal foundation for the protection of tribal sovereignty. However, despite these advances, the U.S. government has continued to undermine tribal sovereignty through various legal and political means. Supreme Court decisions, such as Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, upheld the sovereignty of native tribes, but later decisions, such as the Oliphant v. Suquamish Indian Tribe, 1978, limited the jurisdiction of tribal courts and further weakened tribal authority. In recent years, legal battles over tribal sovereignty have intensified, with tribes fighting for their right to govern themselves and make decisions about their land, resources, and people. One of the most significant areas of contention has been the question of tribal jurisdiction over criminal matters. In many cases, tribes do not have the authority to prosecute non-native individuals who commit crimes on tribal lands. This has led to a situation where non-native perpetrators of violent crimes, including sexual assault and domestic violence, often go unpunished, as they are not subject to tribal law. The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, of 2013 was a significant victory for tribal sovereignty, as it allowed tribes to prosecute non-native offenders for certain crimes committed on tribal lands. This law was an important step in restoring the power of native tribes to protect their citizens and enforce justice within their own territories. However, the law still faces significant challenges and has been subject to legal challenges from various parties, including some states and private interest groups. Another major issue facing native tribes today is the protection of natural resources. Tribal lands are often rich in resources like oil, gas, and minerals, and the U.S. government and private corporations have frequently sought to exploit these resources without the consent of the tribes. The Dakota Access Pipeline protests, for example, brought national attention to the issue of tribal sovereignty and the protection of sacred lands. The Standing Rock Sioux tribe, in particular, fought to block the pipeline, arguing that it would threaten their water supply and violate their sovereignty. The protests were a powerful reminder of the ongoing struggle for tribal rights and self-determination. Moreover, tribes have fought for the recognition of their rights to manage and preserve their ancestral lands. Land use policies, including those governing hunting, fishing, and natural resource extraction, are central to the identity of many tribes. These rights are often in conflict with federal and state policies that prioritize economic development over environmental conservation or cultural preservation. For example, some tribes have fought to protect sacred sites from being desecrated by development projects, such as mining operations, pipelines, or tourism initiatives that disrespect their cultural heritage. The ongoing legal battles over tribal sovereignty are not isolated to a few tribes or specific issues. They have wide-reaching implications for Native American communities across the United States. As tribes continue to fight for their rights, their struggles serve as a blueprint for other Native communities seeking to reclaim their sovereignty and protect their cultural heritage. Tribal sovereignty is about more than just legal battles. It is about the survival of a people, the preservation of a culture, and the recognition of a shared history. When one tribe successfully asserts its sovereignty, it sets a precedent that can empower other tribes to do the same. In this way, the legal victories of individual tribes have a ripple effect, helping to advance the cause of Native American self-determination nationwide. However, these victories do not come easily. The U.S. government has long resisted recognizing the full extent of tribal sovereignty, and many tribes still struggle to assert their rights in the face of legal and political challenges. Tribal sovereignty is a fragile and contested right, and its future will depend on the continued resilience and determination of Native American communities. Looking to the future, the path for tribal sovereignty remains uncertain. While there have been significant legal victories, there are still many challenges that tribes face. Some of the most pressing issues include the ongoing fight for criminal jurisdiction, the protection of natural resources, the right to govern without interference from state and federal authorities, and the ability to negotiate on equal terms with the U.S. government. One of the key challenges for the future of tribal sovereignty is the ongoing struggle to educate and engage non-native communities about the importance of tribal self-governance. The general public often lacks a deep understanding of the history and significance of tribal sovereignty, and this lack of awareness can lead to a failure to respect tribal rights. Advocacy, education, and collaboration between tribes and non-native allies will be crucial in advancing the cause of tribal sovereignty. Furthermore, tribes will need to continue to strengthen their legal and political strategies, building coalitions with other tribes, organizations, and lawmakers to protect their rights. The power of tribal sovereignty lies in the unity and resilience of Native communities, and the future will depend on how well they can work together to defend their rights and assert their authority. In conclusion, the future of tribal sovereignty is a complex and ongoing struggle. It is a fight that involves not only legal battles but also cultural preservation, self-determination, and the recognition of the rights of Native peoples. The outcome of these struggles will shape the future of Native American tribes and their ability to thrive as independent nations within the United States. It is a fight for survival, dignity, and the preservation of a culture that has endured for thousands of years. And as long as Native peoples continue to stand up for their rights, the future of tribal sovereignty remains a vital and ongoing cause. The Yurok tribe's fight for sovereignty is a powerful reminder of the resilience of Native American nations in preserving their identity, laws, and way of life. Their struggles highlight the deep-rooted conflicts between indigenous self-governance and external legal frameworks. More importantly, they serve as an example of how determination, cultural preservation, and legal battles can shape the future of Native rights in America. The lessons from the Yurok tribe's journey are clear. Sovereignty is not just about laws. It's about protecting a people's history, traditions, and future. Their commitment to environmental stewardship, justice, and self-determination is something we can all learn from, especially as we consider broader issues of justice, governance, and sustainability in today's world. If this story inspired you, take a moment to show your support. Like this video, leave a comment about your thoughts on Native sovereignty, and share it to spread awareness. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into Native American history and contemporary struggles. Your engagement helps bring these important stories to light. Together, we can make a difference.